Right, good morning all. It's 10 o'clock, let's make a start. My name is Councillor Matthew Hall and I'm Chairman of Audit and Governance. We will go through a roll call first. Councillors will be first and I'll give out the first name, and then if you could each do a brief introduction, please. So, Richard.
Hello, I'm Richard Biggs, a member for Poundbury Ward in Dorchester.
Thank you. Simon. Presume Simon is not able to attend. Susan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Susan Cockham, Portland Ward.
Thank you. David.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor David Gray, Councillor for Radipole in Weymouth.
Thank you. Brian.
Morning, everybody. I'm Brian Heatley. I'm a councillor for Rodwell and Wyke Ward in Weymouth.
Thank you. Knock.
Good morning. I am Knock True and Lacey Clark, and I am a councillor for Blandford Forum in North Dorset.
Thank you, Knock. Mike.
Good morning, Mike Parks, councillor for Ferndown North Ward.
Bill Pipe.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Bill Pipe. I represent the good people of Litchett Minster, Litchett Matravers and Upton.
Thank you. And Bill Trite.
Hello, I'm Bill Trite. I represent Swanage.
Thank you, Bill. And over to officers now. Aidan.
Yes, good morning. Aidan Dunn, Executive Director for Corporate Development and the Council's Section 151 Officer.
Jonathan.
Good morning, Chairman. I'm Jonathan Mayer. I'm the Corporate Director for Legal and Democratic, and I'm the Council's Monitoring Officer.
Bridget. Are you there, Bridget?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Bridget is here. Over to Mark.
Morning, everybody. I'm Mark Howe. I'm the Service Manager for Assurance.
David.
Good morning. I'm David Trotter. I'm a Risk and Resilience Officer, and I'm in the insurance team. Thank you.
Rupert. Rupert was here. Kate.
Hello, Chairman. Yep, it's Kate Critchell, Democratic Services, producing the meeting today.
And Fiona.
Morning, Chairman. Fiona King here, Democratic Services Officer, clerking the meeting.
Thank you very much. Right, so on to agenda item number 1, which is the apologies, which I presume is just Councillor Christopher.
I haven't received actually apologies from Simon Christopher, but I will note that.
Agenda item number 2 is the minutes. Do I have everybody's okay for signing minutes when I'm next back in? If anybody's got any questions, can they just put it in the chat, please? Okay, I don't see anything coming up, so I'll take that as read. Agenda item number 3 is declarations of interest. Do we have any from members? I'll take the silence as a no. Agenda item number 4 is public participation. I don't believe we've got any, have we, Kate or Fiona?
No, Chairman, we haven't.
Okay,
not received any.
Brilliant, thank you. Agenda item number 5 is the Dorset Council's performance framework. That's over to you, Bridget Downton.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. As I failed to get my mute button to work before, I'm Bridget Downton. I'm Head of Business Intelligence and Corporate Communications, and I'd like to present the performance framework draft document to you today. First of all, apologies for the delay in getting this to Audit and Governance. We've been a bit busy dealing with some of the pandemic issues in the team. So my apologies for the lateness of this document. You'll remember that Cabinet asked you to look at this back in March when we had an early draft in front of them. Some further work has been done since then. So this draft is before you today for comments to feed into Cabinet, and that's why Councillor Wharf is here to hear comments from the committee. The two things that require some further development on the framework are to properly integrate risk management and risk reporting into the framework, and I'm working with Mark Eyre and other colleagues to progress that. And the other thing that we need to work on is some of the detail behind this at the service and operational level. Chairman, I'm going to assume that colleagues have read the report, and I'm very happy to take questions, as I know Councillor Wharf is as well. So over to you, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. So members, the recommendation for agenda item number 5 is to agree the performance framework be revised to incorporate risk reporting in due course, and that we recognise as a committee that this further work needs to be done to build out the detail. First question I see is from Councillor David Gray. Over to you, David.
Chair, I think Brian was first, but I'm happy to go if he's happy for me to go.
Yeah, go on, David.
Go on, David.
Okay, I've got a few questions. First one is more of a sort of comment really, which is wow. I mean, this is more complicated than the Tesco's Balanced Scorecard, so I was shocked when I read it. As far as comments are concerned, I wanted to ask, you make reference to Balanced Scorecard, and I assume that there is a Balanced Scorecard coming because there isn't one in the pack, in the nature of either is it implicit or is there going to be a balanced scorecard in the traditional way of balanced scorecards presented KPIs. So I didn't see one. I assume that that's going to come with the operational level. So that's my first question. I have to say I'm really disappointed that my sort of rant at the last meeting about value for money, it's neither implicit or explicit in anywhere in the framework or in the service level line or the operational line. That language I chose deliberately because that's the thing that residents ask me the most. You know, how does the council get value for money? And it doesn't really appear anywhere. So I'm really disappointed that that's in there. Couple of other things. In a normal sense of going back to the balanced scorecard, it's normally a sort of red, green, amber thing, and that was what I was keen to see, that it's easy for people to understand. So would the balanced scorecard be in the traditional red, green, amber way, traffic lights, so that we can measure performance easily? I was also a little disappointed that the climate and the ecological emergency wasn't an actual KPI. I know it talks about the plan, that it cuts across all 5 of the priorities, but I'd like to see it as a separate point and a key KPI really, so that we can, if you like, hold the feet to the fire really in terms of are we making progress against that. We've declared it, we should measure ourselves against it and not use it as something that's intertwined with the other 5. 2 other points and I'll shut up. One was I didn't see in the organogram that you produced any link of the framework to performance reviews for teams. So normally you would see in that sort of schematic a link to annual performance reviews, sort of explicit in there, and I didn't see that either. I'll leave it there at the moment. Thank you, Chair. I'll leave it there at the moment. I may come back if I may later.
Thanks, David. Bridget, over to you with some answers or points you'd like to come back on.
Thank you, Chairman. So first of all, balanced scorecard. Yes, the approach is going to be using a balanced scorecard. For the avoidance of doubt, in the current committee arrangements for Dorset Council, Audit and Governance's role is to oversee the framework rather than to review performance. So performance will be reviewed by Cabinet and the two overview committees, and Audit and Governance will be able to, obviously if something goes to Cabinet and they want to review individual items, they'll be able to do that. But so it is different from Dorset County Council's Audit and Governance role. So that's the first thing. So the balanced scorecard, using the four traditional approaches, will be reviewed by Cabinet and senior leadership team. So there will be a balanced scorecard, and it will indeed have the red, amber and green, as Councillor Gray was asking. It will absolutely show that. The point about value for money, the balanced scorecard has one of the four elements of the balanced scorecard is around finance, and it's a good point because I think the framework wording could be strengthened, and I said we will look to do that, Chairman, following Councillor Gray's suggestion. That's helpful to be very clear that the financial quadrant of the balanced scorecard is absolutely about value for money as well as budget performance and so on, and also the link to performance review for teams. Again, very good point, and I think we could strengthen the framework, Chairman. So those are both really helpful comments, that we can strengthen the framework with some wording around that to make that absolutely explicit. And I'll have a look to see whether we can put that in the organogram or whether we put it in the wording on the document. So I think probably, Chairman, if you're satisfied with my response to that, I think that's my response to those questions. I think that the Executive Director may want to comment on value for money as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, David, before I let you come back, Aidan just wants to raise a few points with regards to value for money. So Aidan, if you'd like to put your camera on, please.
There we go. Good, thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Yeah, I'd just like to reassure Councillor Gray that we heard loud and clear his comments about looking for assurance around value for money. In the Audit Committee Forward Plan for August, we've got a report coming that's going to describe how we do seek value for money and how we measure that. It's going to talk about the budget process, how we use overview and scrutiny. It'll talk about tenders and the procurement process, talk about our benchmarking activities, how we use external peer challenge and external challenge, and indeed the role of external audit in all of that. So I take the point that Bridget's just commented on about it'd be really helpful to have that built into the performance framework, which we're working on, but we will be able to provide a lot more detail about how we provide value for money at the August committee meeting.
Thank you, Aidan. David, did you want to come back on any of those points?
Yes, please. Yes. Well, thank you for the replies. I just really wanted to clarify the value for money and why I'm sort of so passionate about it. It's about two things really. One's about the language, and that's the language that residents use. I mean, if you look at the three of the four metrics that are in the pack, the customer metric, the operational metric, and the finance metric, you could all argue adds to a value for money qualitative measure rather than a quantitative measure. So I really wanted to say this isn't a race to the bottom in terms of the price of something we pay for. I believe that value for money, a value for money metric, means that we can be more flexible with our procurement and what we're asking teams to do in the council, rather than just race for the bottom, which is not what value for money is about really. I just have one final question, which was around one of the ways that balanced scorecards over the years fall down is they don't track previous performance. I did hear it's not the role, but I just wanted to offer my experience, which is if an element of the balanced scorecard is continuously in the red every 3 months, there needs to be a metric that we can track that, because often on a 3-month cycle, if it's red, it drops off. We need to make sure that if there's a consistently underperforming or indeed consistently overperforming where we need to reward somebody, that we need to track that on a long-term basis. I'm sure it's in the pack, but thank you for the replies. Thank you, Chair.
I don't know if Aidan, you want to come back on that, or Bridget?
Chairman, it's Bridget. I will, if that's okay. And I also realise I didn't answer Councillor Gray's question about climate, so I'll do that as well. On the continuous tracking, there is a part of the framework which is about action tracking. When we were looking at the performance frameworks of all of the predecessor councils, there was some really good practice in a lot of them, and we've tried to pull together elements of those. But the thing that none of the predecessor councils did as well as any of us would like, and I think particular Councillor Gray and the points he was making, was that action tracking, the so what question. So what's this performance telling us and what are we doing about it? So one of the things that the framework is going to incorporate is an action tracker. So where we've got a performance issue, poor performance, or indeed strong performance that we want to maintain, we're going to record an action, so it's you know, a doing thing that somebody has to do with somebody accountable for doing that, and that will get brought forward in each reporting cycle. So we will have that action tracking. In response to the point about climate change, absolutely right, we do need key performance indicators around climate and the ecological emergency, and we are looking at those detailed KPIs. That's the bit about the service and operational level detail, and we'll be working with colleagues to come up with those KPIs in due course. But so yeah, that absolutely does need to be included. We're very aware of that. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Bridget. I mean, for myself, keeping track of the performance is really key. I know that my two previous predecessors as Chairman of Audit on DCC were really concerned that poor performance areas just seem to keep coming back around and around again, and there was never ever some form of mechanism to actually improve. And the expectations on councils, the financial issues that we may be facing, it is really, really important that we keep on top of these. Thank you. Councillor Wharf, I think you wanted to come in at this point. Could you just do a brief introduction to yourself, because unfortunately I did a Freudian slip and forgot you in the roll call.
No problem, Matt. Councillor Peter Wharf, Deputy Leader, and the portfolio includes performance management. If I could just comment on two or three things. One is thank you to David for the wow. The officers have spent a huge amount of time trying to construct a really robust performance measurement system. And to do this, we've decided that we want to do this for the long term and not the short term. And I agree with the Chairman's comments about the reporting on previous regimes. So we are taking a bit more time to try and get it right in a very robust way. So I'm grateful for the comments, and I'm grateful for your input. In particular on climate change, the plan for climate change is yet to be agreed by the Cabinet. It went past the EAP for the first time late last week. That plan will lead to a series of actions and targets, and that will in turn lead us to produce some intelligent and meaningful KPIs as to progress. So we're not quite there yet, but it will be part of it, I can assure you, and we will continue to work with you to make sure that you can review progress meaningfully. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wharf. Next question from Councillor Brian Heatley, please.
Thank you, Chairman. A lot of my response to this was, I think, in many ways very similar to Dave's. It seems to me that this sort of system, the important thing I want to get to grips with is the detail. You can talk around the system quite a lot, but I want to know what the performance measures are going to be, how they stack up against the things we say we are going to do in the corporate plan. Is it covering everything? Do they look robust, and so on and so forth? And the paper before us today doesn't really help me do that. So I think it's slightly more than detail, as far as I'm concerned, that is involved here. I too was concerned that there was nothing about climate change, but that's been covered very fully now. I was also concerned that there was no explicit mention of geographical relative deprivation. We have in the corporate plan provide additional support to communities with the greatest challenges, I would expect our system to say something about what that additional support is, what is being achieved. Indeed, by looking at those two things, what value for money we're getting in that area. So I am disappointed in a sense that I was kind of hoping we have coming before us today a mock-up of the sort of report that the Cabinet and the senior management team will be getting. Thank you.
Bridget, did you want to come back on the points raised by Councillor Heatley?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the first thing is I would have liked to have put that detail in front of you as well. And I'd say two things about that. One is my team have been flat out 7 days a week dealing with data and so on in response to the pandemic. So, you know, sincere apologies, we're not here earlier and with more detail. That said, talking to Councillor Wharf about how we were going to progress this, what we decided, and this is, I've worked with Councillor Wharf for a number of years, and I think this is a really good way of working that he practices, which is let's get something out there in front of people that we can then that audit and governance in this case can help shape and help inform, because that's kind of the point really of coming to you. And so your input's really valuable and helpful, and particularly we've already covered off the climate change stuff, but the bit about geographical deprivation is a really good point, well made, and we really need to think about how we can represent that in the performance framework and the indicators that we look at. So that next step is what we're going to be moving on to, is that detail, and all of the input from today is really helpful for me and Councillor Wharf in going away and working out what that detail looks like, and we'll be bringing that in front of informal cabinet, who will be meeting on a monthly basis now to look specifically at performance. And the first thing they're going to be doing is looking at working up that kind of detailed stuff that they need to see, and then when that's going in front of cabinet, you'll have those opportunities to feed in at that process as well and look at it in that sense. But so I'm going to take the comments along with Peter Wharf around looking at those indicators and the things that you've referred to, and this will be an ongoing dialogue. This is very much the start of the performance framework, and the detail has still got to be worked up, and my apologies for that.
Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Heatley?
Yes, please. Yes, let's have an ongoing dialogue, and of course, I well understand the pressures you've been under. But I hope it's an ongoing dialogue that involves this committee. You've mentioned it coming back to informal cabinet. Well, that's all very well, but I might try to influence cabinet from time to time, but it's not quite the same as being on the committee itself. And I would like this detail to come back to this committee.
Bridget?
Chairman, yeah, I'll have a look with colleagues at the forward plan and a discussion with Councillor Wharf about process and timing, and when we can bring some of that detailed information back then, as well as actually the information about how we're going to integrate risk. We can do that at the same time, so we can bring back a second iteration with the bit about the risk integration and the detailed measures and so on that we're going to be looking at. So I'll have a look at the timescale and get something on the forward plan, Chairman.
If you could, that would be really helpful, because what we don't want is to be in a situation where members of the committee make suggestions of how things could change or be improved, then for it to disappear in the ether and we're not quite sure. You know, some things you could add and some things you might decide, well, actually we can't do that. But because if you run the risk of it not coming back to the committee, we don't have the explanation, and it's knowledge is key. Knowledge is key. Thank you. Did you want to say anything else, Councillor Heatley?
No, fine, that's it.
Thank you. Next question then is to the Vice Chairman, Councillor Richard Biggs.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it is a long document. I think I'm familiar with the Dorset County Council one, which was a lot long, so I'm quite familiar with that. In some ways, you know, we are far more complicated than Tesco's. We might not have the same spend, but we're dealing with a huge number of things that impact on people's lives, critical needs. You know, we're not just selling stuff on shelves, we're doing a lot more. I think that doesn't stop us to try and, you know, make our documents lean. But I think there is a danger, you know, of becoming slave to sort of metrics and not remaining agile. I think that's something that was key. And we all need to, as an audit committee, to always ask the question, why do we have that metric? Do we still need it? Is it still relevant? And yes, we do need to monitor the trends. But I think, you know, we're not there to monitor the performance, but we are there to endorse those metrics. So I think once we actually get those, we need to study those and find if they are the right ones and they are covering the right issues, and then we can sort of move on. And others are monitoring that performance. But yes, we need to get the right ones there and understand what is involved in compiling that data, because if it takes an army, a cottage industry to produce stuff that is just noted, then, you know, that's not good use of our time. You know, if we're talking about value for money, having a lot of people creating metrics that are of little value are equally as poor value for money for the council. I think just need to bear that in mind, that's all.
I think you're right, Councillor Biggs. Having sat on predecessor audit committees, I was always amazed by the huge volume of KPIs, of which quite a substantial amount seem to have little value or explanation as to what their worth is. Did you want to come back on that, Bridget, with any points?
Not specifically, I don't think, Chairman. I completely agree with the points that Councillor Biggs has made, and I think the conversation has been really helpful for us in helping to shape, you know, what those metrics are, and we will bring them back for you to have a look at and you know, to give a view on. We, you know, some work has started on that, but we haven't done the detail on that because we've still got things like the climate change plan is being worked up, and we need to look in light of COVID as well about what makes sense to be measuring and monitoring on a regular basis. So we're doing that kind of assessment and analysis at the minute. So yeah, all comments gratefully received, and we'll bring something back in for that detail for you to look at.
Thank you, Bridget. Councillor Wharf.
Thank you, Matt. Just very quickly, Councillor Heatley's concern, he didn't use these words, but you might be left out of the loop. As you know, whenever you've asked me to appear before your committee, I've always been delighted to do so, and will continue to be delighted to do so. And if you have any questions, I will always accept your invitation and come and talk to you about the progress of the performance management system. As Bridget said, I take your comments very seriously in terms of issues and in terms of ensuring this doesn't become a cottage industry, and ensuring that metrics are discarded once they've ceased to be useful, and we get new metrics. We must avoid creating new metrics without getting rid of old ones. We must keep it completely relevant, and we must make sure that we come before your good selves at regular intervals so that you can comment. Happy to do that, happy to give my commitment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Peter and Bridget. I think it's really useful to have a system in place where, you know, every couple of months or every couple of meetings that you come back and give an update or let us examine various bits of your framework. I'd rather that we had that as a system that was built in, rather than needing to ask for you to come. So if you could sort that out, Bridget, and get that in our forward plan, I would be really appreciative of that. Are there any other questions from members? I'll take the silence as a no. So as I said at the start, this is to agree that the review and that further detail will come back to us. So is everybody happy with that? I'll take the silence as a yes. Thank you very much, Bridget. Thank you to your team as well for all the hard work you're doing during these trying times, and look forward to you coming back in the near future with some greater detail, etc. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman.
Right then, committee members, we shall now move on to agenda item number 6, which is the annual governance statement. This has come back after our last meeting where we raised a good number of points for Mark Eyre and David Trotter to go away and think on. So Mark, David, over to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, just to come back really with what you just said, we had some really good feedback from members following that last session, and hopefully we've strengthened the report on the basis of that. And actually it's a good example, I think, of that benefit of that ongoing dialogue that was referenced in that previous item. In particular, the bits that we've added in, you should be able to see in red actually the changes to the document, but we've added in a section around key achievements from the first year of Dorset Council. We've made a clearer reference to the revised committee structures. We've added some better references to the performance management framework, which links very much in with that earlier agenda item. There's a more focused statement on value for money. We've added in more information on our COVID response, and within that including the challenge and the consideration that the Resources Committee had. This time around, the risk register has been included as an appendix. It hasn't actually changed from the document that was circulated at the last meeting. That those amendments should be made. There was also, you probably recall from that last session, there were also quite a number of comments made about that risk management report, which we'll be building on and looking to implement in time for the September risk management update. So really, there's probably not really anything else for me to add, unless there's any further comments from the committee on this revised version of the statement. But essentially, once we've got any final comments, we'll then look to present that to the leader and the chief executive for signing and including within the annual accounts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Members, do we have any questions? While I'm waiting to see if any of you put in the chat, Mark, I think it's on page 46. There is a section about the ethical questionnaires which are sent out to businesses and suppliers. Do any members ever see what these ethical questionnaires actually are and what they entail?
To be honest, Chair, I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to go away and find out about that if I may.
If you could and get back to us, that would be really helpful. Councillor Heatley, you have a question. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, can I acknowledge the huge amount of work you've done to take on our points from last time, in particular, making a bit more of the history that's led to the position we're in. I've just got one little nit, honestly. Page 40, right at the bottom, is a response to the annual government statement of somebody for the previous year. We aim to be better at aligning our finances to the council plan and performance framework. And then the response says a new Dorset Council plan has been approved, which is true, but it doesn't say whether you think this is a good idea or not. I think it's a splendid idea, but I'd like to know whether we think it's a good idea or not, rather than just saying we've got a plan. Thank you.
Over to you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor. I mean, that's a fair point. We'll look to make that amendment. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bill Trite, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's more by way of a couple of comments, actually. I must apologise first because I would have brought these two small matters up had I been at the last meeting, but nevertheless I will do so because you know, I do think there is something to be said for them. In the draft there is a headline that says good governance is about how the council ensures that it is doing the right things in the right way and for the benefit of the residents it serves. For many people, that will be the only line in this whole thing that they'll ever read. So I just feel that there's an assumption when you read that headline that the council does ensure it's doing the right things, etc. And to me, there's a very slight whiff of arrogance about it. Doesn't it look and feel better if we were to say good governance is about how the council strives to ensure that it is doing the right thing in the right way, etc., etc. It's just a very small change. Doesn't it look better if we say good governance is about how the council strives to ensure? A little less arrogant, I think. It looks both more earnest and more honest, if I may say so. My second point is under point 3 on page 31. In the second paragraph, it talks about the activities through which the council is accountable to and engages with, and I quote, leads the community. I think it's very undesirable to say or to claim that a council leads the community, even if in a way it does. Councils are there primarily to serve, as we all know, so I would strike out leads and either put nothing in its place or put serves there instead. Only small points, I know, but I think it's important how any particularly members of the public reading this are going to perceive it. Your response, please.
Over to you, Mark.
Thanks very much, Councillor Troy. Points very well made, and yeah, we can certainly make those adjustments. Thank you for the comments.
Okay.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So the recommendation is to consider and comment on the revised statement. I would like to thank Mark and David for all your work that you've done on this. It's really good to see that the comments that we made at the last meeting have been seriously taken on board, and I think we've got a far better basis of a statement now than before. So does anybody have any objections to us just passing this? I'll take that as a no. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, David. Right, we now move on to agenda item number 7 and 8, which is over to Rupert from SWAP. I just want to say at this point to you, Rupert, and if you could pass this on to Sally and all the other members of your team, thank you very much for the work that you've done during this pandemic. Members may not be aware that many of your staff have actually come over and assisted during this time, including Sally, who helped with the registrar service. So really appreciated, Rupert. Thank you. And now over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for taking the time to recognise that. I'm sure, I think Sally's actually listening in live, so I'm sure she'll appreciate that. And apologies, she can't join today's meeting. I think she has tried for weeks with various IT sort of problems, but she genuinely wanted to be here today. But no, thank you for taking the time to recognise the efforts of SWAP staff. I'll try and cover off what was going to be Sally's paper. So this is our sort of internal audit update sort of progress report. Just by way of introduction, this was obviously due to be presented at the audit committee on the 24th of March. As you'll know, that was obviously sort of postponed due to the COVID-19 outbreak. So at that point, sort of in conjunction with the authority's senior leadership team, we obviously agreed that we'd sort of temporarily pause our internal audit work and, like you say, sort of focus on redeploying as many staff as we could into sort of critical areas of the council to assist with its emergency response. So this is essentially the paper that we were due to present on the 24th of March, but we've obviously brought it up to date just to cover up to sort of the recent period. So starting on page sort of 1 of our report, or that's sort of page 72, I think, in your agenda pack, we obviously do sort of provide an ongoing sort of opinion to support our annual opinion. And this was obviously up to the point where the COVID-19 outbreak struck, but positive to report that at that point risks were reasonably well managed with the systems of internal control working effectively based on our sort of coverage of internal audit work. Since our last report, which I think was back in December 2019, which seems a long time ago now, we have issued sort of 5 partial opinions and on the sort of areas that we covered throughout the plan. We've set out details of each of those throughout the report, which will hopefully give a sort of a brief summary and a brief overview of the key findings. I won't go through the sort of detail of all of those, but just as the headlines. The first one there, the Pupil Premium Plus grant by the Virtual School for Looked After Children. Again, hopefully we've set out sort of details of the key findings there. We've also marked this as a sort of high risk based on our sort of categorisation. And basically the headline was that it wasn't possible to evidence that the grant was being used effectively in every instance to provide the best value for money for the council and achieved improved education outcomes. So just as update on that one, we did, so we concluded that back in December 2019. We've obviously undertaken some follow-up work in the interim. We did that back in February and that was really positive. That demonstrated sort of swift and positive progress had been made towards implementing our recommendations. We had sort of programmed a further follow-up just to sort of provide the committee with complete assurance that that sort of matters have been taken fully forward. Unfortunately, this was due in April, and obviously due to the lockdown, we were unable to complete this work. However, we are now hoping to complete that prior to the summer holidays, with the aim of reporting back in September. So like I say, hopefully on that one, some sort of swift and positive progress was made, but would like to undertake a sort of further follow-up just to provide complete assurance that those issues have been addressed. Just staying on the very first page, the other sort of notable figure that I draw members' attention to, a relatively high percentage of recommendations, so 79% that are not implemented by the time our sort of follow-up reviews come round, and that sort of with the implementation date having passed. I think in lots of cases there's good reasons for this, and again we just like to flag that figure that's relatively high. We have included in the appendix sort of a summary of the key follow-ups where some of those recommendations haven't been implemented, and I think Mark probably has circulated a paper in terms of one of those and may want to give a further update on the whistleblowing one. Again, just moving through our report, I've sort of mentioned the use of Pupil Premium for Looked After Children, the other sort of partial assurance audits that we've covered in the sort of period since our last progress report. We've got the framework for assessing the effectiveness of social care practice. We carried out a review of compliance with IR35 legislation. We've carried out an audit of financial reconciliations, and finally our one on public law outline, all of which received a sort of partial opinion, and like I say, hopefully set out sort of a brief high-level summary of the findings. I've talked about the sort of audits where we follow up and we sort of judge that insufficient progress has been made. Like I say, one of those was the whistleblowing audit, which I believe is now sort of there's a clear action plan and a clear line of sight to take that forward. The other one was an audit of Portersham School, but again, we'll be in touch with the school shortly to sort of follow up further progress on that one. So I wasn't planning to go into any more detail than that, but obviously happy to expand any of the areas or take any questions from members at that stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rupert. First question is from Councillor Richard Biggs.
Yeah, I think if we had our meeting back in April, I think the issue around Pupil Premium Plus would have been a long talking point. And I know a lot of things have happened since then, but I think I'm sort of reassured that things have been taken to deal with this. I'm not sure whether controls are in place to stop this happening again, and I don't want this sort of feel like it's been sort of swept under the carpet because we've moved on. It was a serious concern, that money looks like it's misused. I don't know if that was intentionally, unintentionally, or what. We don't really know enough of the detail around that. But I think it should be a serious concern to all of us. I just need sort of assurance that it can't happen again, and that that structures are in place to ensure that appropriate strength to audit and control that process. Because I'm not entirely convinced we've really got to the bottom of this yet. That's just my view.
Do you want to come back on that, Rupert?
Yes, no, thank you for that point. And rest assured, we will keep following up the area until we're sort of satisfied that the recommendations have indeed been taken forward. I think it will be slightly more challenging. That you'll be aware there's the sort of blueprint for change. There was sort of restructures in that area amongst others. However, we'll look to sort of follow through the sort of the substance and the theme of the recommendations and make sure they've been taken forward and incorporated by any new individuals in post.
Thank you, Rupert. I think if you're able to bring that back to us in September, I think we're going to need quite a lot of detail here to make sure that we've got that conviction that things have improved, that the checks are in place, etc. Fiona, can you make sure that you tie in with Rupert so that if that's coming in September, that we make sure that we got the relevant officers to come along to that meeting to help with any questions, etc. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine, Chairman. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. First of all, can we have Mark Eyre? Can you do the update, please, on the whistleblowing section?
Thanks, Chair. No problem at all. I mean, I can either give you sort of a reassurance about our what we're planning to do, or I can go in a bit more detail as to what some of those actions and responses are, Chair. It depends how much detail you want me to go into.
Can we have a bit of detail, please?
Yeah, certainly. So apologies for the delays in some of this. I've inherited some of these actions and not moved them on quite as quickly as I'd like to. SWAT contacted me to carry out a follow-up review. At that time, I asked for a little bit more time, and then the COVID outbreak happened, and some of those priorities changed. But I have been looking at the findings and started to move them along a little bit. And as Rupert indicated, I've set up a bit of an action plan in response. Quite a number of the recommendations are about how we better promote the whistleblowing and fraud policies and the accessibility of those. So I've been talking to the communications team about that, and we're looking to get some comms out both from an internal perspective and also improving the accessibility of the policies within the next couple of weeks. There's a recommendation about updates to the policies, and I'll be following the corporate approach to policy updates in that respect, which I think is later on, maybe later on the agenda actually. But I'm meeting with the policy officer on Wednesday to address this. One of the recommendations is around an annual report on fraud and whistleblowing activity coming to both the senior leadership team and to this committee. So I'll look to commence that from the September meeting onwards, if that's okay with yourself, Chair, and ask if we could build that into the forward plan, and then we'd look to present that updated report to the nearest meeting at the end of each financial year in future. The one that I've not sort of moved forward yet and need to focus some attention on is that there was a recommendation around the fact that we'd adopted a new anti-fraud, corruption and bribery strategy. However, there wasn't a detailed delivery plan to support that. So what I'll need to do on that one is I'm going to look to bring together a small officer group to address that, and would hope to report back to the committee within that annual report that I referenced just a minute ago. So in summary, sort of accepting really I need to hold my hand up a little bit. Not everything's moved forward at the pace that I'd like it to, but hopefully now confident we've got a prioritised action plan in place to move forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Fiona, are you able to tie in with Mark so that we can get that into September's meeting and on the forward plan, please? Oh, she's gone. Next officer, please, Aidan. Can you give us some updates, please, on the points about the lack of bank reconciliations for the old Purbeck District Council? And also, don't know if you would like to comment on page 76. There's a section within the SWOT report about achieved savings and sort of how relevant's not the right phrase, but how relevant that is considering the pandemic. Over to you, Aidan.
Thank you. Can I ask Jim to comment on the bank reconciliations, then I'll come back on the achieved savings, if I may.
Okay, over to you, Jim.
Yep, hi, good morning everybody, thanks Chair. In terms of bank reconciliations, the bank reconciliations are going through another process. There's probably a timing issue here. So yes, we were out of date for a little while. Contextually, we had 4 or 5 different systems still, and we lost staff during tranche 2. So we had other staff picking up new tasks without adequate handover, so we were some way behind. We were up to date, I think, as of year end. Deloitte have those as part of their external audits that they're checking through at the moment to give that level of assurance as well. And I'm sure that they are up to date as of the end of June. There will always be 1 or 2 reconciling items. Purbex is the most tricky. It's a technical issue, but we are planning on switching off completely the old Purbex legacy systems in the first half of this financial year. So all the bank recs will be done in SAP from this point on, deliver some resilience for us. So we should be pretty much up to date.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, Aidan.
Yes, yeah, if I could take colleagues to page 76 of the report, there's a bullet point about audits that have been moved into the new financial year from last financial year, and one was the achievement of savings plans. So the issue for this is, as an organisation, we do need to continue to make efficiencies and savings, and pre-pandemic we had our transformation plan in particular that was scheduled to make 3 million savings through procurement and 3 million savings through transformation in itself. We were at a stage in the final quarter of last year of developing those plans, so we felt it was slightly premature to audit those plans that were under development, which is why we delayed the audit into this new financial year, or postponed it. But then, as part of our response to the pandemic, we've had to postpone the implementation of the transformation and procurement savings, fundamentally because we haven't got the management capacity or attention to be able to deal with those. So now, as we, as I suppose we sort of learn to live with COVID and we start to move towards business as usual, we're looking at the new financial reality that we've got to live with. There's an inevitability, as we were last year, that we've got to make some efficiencies and savings through the coming year. What we don't know is the scale of those yet, so we haven't got a written down detailed savings plan. The point is of this particular audit is we need to be able to prove that we do what we say, and if we don't, if we're not good at achieving our savings, then we need to learn from that so that we can improve in the future. So it's in that context, that's the role of the audit. So I think it's going to be really valuable for us once we have got our savings plans and they're underway to have them audited to make sure that we're doing what we say and to learn those lessons.
Thank you, Aidan. Councillor Christopher, do you have a question for Aidan? I thought you did, sorry.
Aidan, can you hear me?
Yes.
You can't hear me.
Yeah.
Aidan, what is the effect on internal controls and segregation of duties with the current arrangements?
In terms of with the current arrangements of COVID, that sort of thing. To be honest, we sort of feel reasonably comfortable. We've still got the vast majority of workforce involved, although kind of working from home. So it's still 2,500 people working from home, and we're really mindful of maintaining those segregation of duties. I think a good example of that will be on paying out business grants, which has been a new piece of work for us. We've paid out £103 million worth of government funding to local businesses, but throughout that, even though we're working from home on a new process, we have that clarity between those receiving the information, those processing it, and those actually making the payments. So we've been mindful, well, very conscious of the segregation of duties, and we haven't. So in a way, it's business as usual, but working from home would be the description, I'd say. So I don't see that as a particular concern at this point.
And the risk of fraud and hacking into computer systems?
Yeah, good challenge. Because we've been so reliant on our IT systems, data secure or information security and the integrity of our system has been a real key issue. We're confident about the integrity of the systems. That's something that's been sort of checked and tested by the digital EAP. We've had a briefing there. We had one of the interesting elements of that is being mindful of where the potential cyber attacks are happening. So we've kept an eye out sort of nationally through our networks about the sorts of cyber attacks that have been taking place. One of the areas that we were concerned about was the use of Zoom. So Zoom is a particular piece of software that enables colleagues to have sort of functional web calls such as this. We identified that if we were to download that onto our system, it would expose us to a greater risk. So we didn't do that. So we're kind of very mindful of those aspects. And as routine, we get cyber attacks, which we're able to resist. But it's something that we're very vigilant about, and we've got a good team in the case.
Okay, thanks, Aidan.
Thank you, Aidan. Question really for yourself, Rupert. I mean, we're obviously this agenda item is about reviewing the progress. Now, obviously, with COVID, the amount of work that yourself and Sally, etc., have been able to do has been heavily restricted. Do you foresee that you are still able to do the planned list of programme within this year?
I think I'll probably touch on that as part of the next paper, if that's all right, Chair. I mean, happy to run through it now, but I think it's probably covered to some extent in the next paper.
Okay, if I leave that then to the next one for you. Councillor Biggs, you wanted to ask another question?
Yeah, it's just regarding, we've mentioned the whistleblowing, and also we've mentioned, well, we haven't looked at particularly the effectiveness of social care practice, which raised a number of issues. And we always seem to see in the text that the blueprint for change is sort of dealing with these sort of issues. And I just have some concerns that that how do we check that actually is the case, and there seems to be this sort of panacea for fixing everything. How can we be assured that is dealing with these concerns, these sort of failings in structure, and I think that not being able to monitor the effectiveness of our social care is a serious worry. So I'd really like to know that Blueprint for Change will deal with this, rather than it just being a hope that it's going to deal with this.
Did you want to come back on that, Rupert?
Yes, I see that Jonathan has requested to speak, but from an audit perspective, obviously any audit review that receives a partial assurance opinion, our standard practice is that we will follow up automatically any of those audits through to sort of completion of the recommendations. So whilst we won't obviously be able to comment on the wider sort of impact of Blueprint for Change when looking at this sort of specific issue in terms of the effectiveness of social care and some of the issues we picked up there, we'll follow those through from an internal audit point of view to sort of provide you some assurance that those specific issues are sort of not lost and are indeed taken forward.
Did you want to come back on that, Richard?
No, I look forward to those responses and that we see it, and obviously we will challenge it if we're not provided it with the evidence later on, I think.
Jonathan.
Chairman, I was simply going to suggest that if members have concerns about something like the Blueprint for Change, and is it going to deliver everything that is suggested, then that is a concern that as a committee you could raise with the People Overview and Scrutiny Committee and ask them to satisfy themselves that that is really happening, because this is really in the area of the People Overview and Scrutiny Committee. But you could make that request to them.
Okay. Jim, is it now that you want to bring in the comments from Deloitte?
Yes, Chair, I think Claire Skivins from Deloitte is on the call. So as the internal audit plan progress is the most relevant point at which Claire could contribute to work that's going on, and just to give you an update on where we are with the external audit at the moment. Claire, if that's okay with you? Hello, Claire, are you there?
Hello, Claire, it's Kate. You just need to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry, I'm not used to using Teams. Morning, everybody. I've been listening in, and most of the items that you've discussed today will feed into our overall audit, as we need to consider your value for money arrangements, and we're specifically looking at the children's services area as a significant risk area. So what you've been discussing in relation to your internal audit work will feed into that and our conclusion. And we'll audit the annual governance statement as well, and everything will feed into our overall areas of work and our opinions. In terms of the audit of the financial statements, so we're well underway now. We've received a final draft of the accounts, I think, which are due to be signed off next week by Aidan, and we are well underway with our testing in all the significant areas. And it's just moving along as it should be, really. I think we're starting to see some areas where we're having to reach out to legacy systems, which we just may need to be a bit more creative in our thinking and as to how we get assurance in those areas, such as like payroll systems, where we've got the legacy systems from Purbeck and East Dorset to try and get access to. And I think it's making sure that we can get what we need to give us the assurance in those areas. But yeah, it's moving along where we need to. We're having regular calls with Jim and Heather, who are being brilliant in terms of helping move along areas we need to. I think in terms of our fixed asset valuation work, that's been a huge piece of work, just because we've had 3 different valuers involved and different approaches. So I think essentially the people, our specialists who've reviewed that work, have done sort of 6 independent reviews, I think, of all the different former councils in terms of their assets that they're bringing across to Dorset. But his initial feedback in relation to that is that everything was materially looking okay, so that's really positive. We just need to look into more detail around that work. But yeah, that's where we are so far. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions for Deloitte? I'll take that as a no. Thank you very much, Claire. Much appreciated.
No problem. Thank you.
Oh, no, sorry, Claire. Councillor Christopher, you have a question.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, that's marvellous. Sorry, these may seem academic questions to some people, but I do want to explore these particular items. In respect of the accounts that you're drawing up to March 2020, are you going to be auditing the March 2020 accounts?
Yes,
as external auditors?
Yes,
now,
that's correct.
With relation to the contracts for the 3 hotels in the Weymouth area, which have been used to house homeless people during this crisis, presumably those contracts would have gone unconditional before the 31st of March, and therefore you would be looking at these particular items, and you would be looking at the internal control system around the costs associated with those items of expenditure, because they will fall into those accounts.
It do fall into the account, so we wouldn't specifically look at those, because when we look at expenditure, we will sample test. So we might not have selected those items as part of our sample testing. And in relation to the internal controls surrounding the procurement of those contracts, that will be something that internal audit would typically look at. But I can liaise with Jim in relation to those, and we can find out more in relation to those contracts, and we can link them in with our value for money work, if that's an area that you would be interested.
Yes, indeed, I'm sure that would be of interest. Okay. My second and final point, and you may think I'm obsessed about these Purbeck bank reconciliations. I'm almost given to understand that there were not monthly bank reconciliations being undertaken at Purbeck, and surely that's not the culture at the new Dorset Council. There are monthly bank reconciliations undertaken.
Shall I comment on that one, Claire, first?
Yes,
as you may not have got to the process yet. So the context that I wanted to add earlier was about legacy systems and about staff leaving Purbeck. So up until Purbeck ceased to exist, regular bank reconciliations were done. It was a straightforward matter. Once that system started to interface into SAP, it was kept going for a while, but because we lost a grip on key staff that left at the time, it was taken over by new staff without much handover. So bank reconciliations were done, but they were at the stage where they were not completed on time, they were not completed accurately. There were lots of reconciling items which it took us quite some time to bring up to date, but they should be up to date now, Councillor Christopher.
That's very interesting. I'm always concerned when items get posted to suspense accounts, and certainly when there's six-figure sums posted to suspense accounts, and indeed those figures remaining on suspense accounts.
As part of our audit, we will look at suspense accounts to make sure that they're cleared down, that there's nothing being held in them, and the value of those items within the suspense accounts. So we'll look at that. And then in terms of the bank reconciliations, we typically we'll look at the process through the year, but we will typically look at the year-end reconciliation, and we'll do our testing to that year-end reconciliation, and we'll review all the reconciling items and do testing accordingly. Again, this probably links in with internal audit and their financial systems internal audit work they do in relation to banking and cash management. As we don't typically take a controls approach in relation to our audit, but we will, if we come across where bank reconciliations haven't been done, then we will comment on them, but we don't rely on the controls of that.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Christopher, or did you want to come back?
No, that's absolutely fine.
Thank you. Next question comes from Councillor Bill Pipe.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for clarity for both the public and members, can you give me an assurance there is nothing untoward with the state of the bank reconciliations for my former district council, Purbeck? Before the rumours start flying?
I think what we'll do, what we probably need to do is I need to touch in, because I know this is an area where we're pulling all the information together. We haven't got a complete set of information yet for us to be able to audit. So I think we will definitely be looking at Purbeck at the year end and the completeness of that reconciliation and sign it all through. So we'll be able to, when we sign off the audit, we won't specifically comment on Purbeck's reconciliation unless we have a control recommendation, which will be probably around what Jim has just mentioned, around the timeliness of it being completed, and you know, how it looks. I suppose it's just that it all pulls together. So that would be how we report.
Did you want to come back on that, Bill? You're on mute.
There we go. A partial answer, but not.
It is, yeah, we haven't completed our work in the area yet for us to be able to give you a conclusion.
Right, okay. Let's rephrase the question then to try and make it a little bit easier. Do you detect anything untoward in the Purbeck reconciliations on the bank statements, or is it just new staff errors, not knowing the routines, this, that, and the other? Do you detect anything at all, or is it just you're just playing catch up on what were sort of poorly prepared or given bank reconciliations after the demise of Purbeck?
We haven't concluded our work in this area at all. So we would definitely, it's not our job to look for fraud or anything untoward. But if there are things that don't work out and we can't reconcile and are materially incorrect, then we'll definitely raise it with you. But I think we haven't looked at this in detail yet. It hasn't been reviewed or signed off, so I can't comment. on that at the moment, so we might have to come back to that one.
Thank you. I think Eden wants to come in at this point.
Can I just say I'd very much welcome you coming back on that at our next meeting, because it does concern me. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, if I could just come in, it's Aidan Dunn, Section 151 officer. Just to come in, so Purbeck District Council has ceased to exist. The accounts were closed last year, received by this audit committee and externally audited. So Purbeck Council's accounts were closed, and there are no issues with there. And then what we've got here is, and Rupert's about to come in and comment, is kind of looking at some of the history of the bank reconciliations, and that's kind of coming forward. So for the public's perception, and as Councillor Pipe is sort of anxious about that, Purbeck's accounts were closed and there were no issues, and that's been audited. That's fine. So could I just bring Rupert in, if I may, Chair, to comment on the internal audit aspect of that?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, thank you, Aidan. Rupert Bamberger from SWAP. Just to add that, happy to work with Claire or Jim to provide a sort of follow-up, an internal audit follow-up of reconciliations if it's the right timing prior to the September meeting. Like I say, as it was a partial opinion, we would follow it up as a matter of course, just to sort of provide that assurance. Like I think Jim has already covered, that it was probably a combination of transfer of systems, of staffing sort of changes or loss of staff, to hopefully now provide assurance that, like Aidan says, moving forward as a Dorset Council, all reconciliations sort of up to date and being sort of completed adequately.
Did you want to come back on it? Anything, Councillor Pipe?
Yes, please, Chairman. No criticism of Claire, but where Claire couldn't give me an answer, I think that Aidan and Rupert have given me the answer that best pleases me. Thank you.
Any other questions from members on this agenda item? Did you want to say anything else, Rupert, before you moved on to agenda item number 8?
No, I think that was it from me. Thank you, Chair.
Well, as agenda item 7 was effectively to note the progress, we shall now move on to agenda item number 8. Over to you, Rupert.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our internal audit sort of Q2 plan, as well as a bit of sort of background of our planning approach this year. Because as you will appreciate, it's somewhat of a unique year and situation we find ourselves in. So same sort of background and context to this, we were due to sort of bring and had in fact submitted a 6-month internal audit plan to the committee meeting on the 24th of March. Again, obviously that meeting was unfortunately postponed. Since then, like I say, obviously a lot's changed. We've had to sort of adapt and update our approach to internal audit planning and work. So set out on the first page there is sort of a summary of where we are, where it sort of stands at the very start of Q2. Like you've already covered, Chairman, a number of our staff will obviously redeployed as part of the authority's sort of response to COVID-19, and we sort of worked in areas such as revenue and benefits and administering the grants paid out to small businesses. And like you say, Sally also assisted with the registration service. So sort of mid-March, we effectively liaised with SLT and effectively paused our sort of planned programme of work. Like I say, we're obviously now into Q2. One member of staff remains redeployed, but apart from that, we're starting to return to some form of business as usual. However, we do recognise that there are still likely to be priority and capacity challenges in certain areas of the authority. So therefore, a lot of our internal audit work is likely to be reactive, supportive work that sort of hopefully assists with the recovery phase of the council. So therefore, sort of given the pace of change that I think we'll all experience this year, I think it's probably prudent that we plan quarterly this year, and therefore sort of page 4 of this paper sort of sets out some of the planned work that we're due to undertake in Q2. That said, there are likely to be new requests for work coming in weekly, and indeed there have been a number since this paper's been put together. So I think it would be really difficult to set out exactly what we'll be covering this year. But as we discussed at the pre-meet, Chair, I think it would be sensible to implement a new sort of system or a new technology whereby the committee and SLT can see the work coming in and work coming out a bit more on a sort of live or sort of regular basis. So I think even a quarter in advance will change so much that it'd be really difficult to put it down on paper.
Yeah, I think Rupert, just on that point, as I mentioned in the pre-meeting, when we've gone from the previous year of having monthly meetings, I think it's really important that now that we don't have those monthly meetings, that you are able to keep us informed of what is going on at a regular interval. So anything that you can do in conjunction with Aidan and the SLT, so the members of this committee and myself have that information, it would be really appreciated. Because otherwise we're potentially trying to react to something that is several months old, and that's not helpful to the committee, and that's not helpful to the council as a whole.
Yes, absolutely, Chair. Thank you. We'll certainly try to introduce a system where you can sort of see what's happening. So like I say, we're sort of at the start of Q2, so we're starting to sort of recommence our sort of internal audit work as we traditionally would. Hopefully from sort of Q3 onwards, we'll be in a position to sort of make this much more sort of risk-based as we would like to, and provide that sort of risk-based planning and coverage. However, like I say, at this stage, it will be a sort of hybrid approach with reactive requests, helping sort of support the recovery. But picking up on your earlier sort of question, Chair, as whether we'll sort of be able to complete sufficient and adequate work for the year. I think it will have to be a balance this year, and on page 2 there we've set out some key questions for the authority, that for us it's really about achieving that proportionate balance, that we absolutely want to help the authority as much as possible in its response and recovery phase, but we do need to maintain a balance of our sort of statutory role of providing sort of sufficient and adequate coverage of the key risks. So I think at this stage we've hopefully got that balance just about right, but obviously the balance will hopefully shift a bit more as we move into Q3 and onwards.
Thank you, Rupert.
Thank you, Chair. That's all.
Members, Councillor David Gray, you have a question.
Not about this paper, Chair. It was one in any other business, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Do any members have any questions? I'll take the silence as a no. Thank you very much, Rupert, for that. I think it's a question of keeping us updated really with what is going on, because as you say, you know, times are different, times are strange, and time pressures. So it's quite important, particularly, you know, the earlier things that we mentioned, like about the pupil premium plus, we need to be kept as much informed as possible with that. Thank you. Right then, members, we move on to agenda item number 9. Over to you, Jonathan.
Chairman, thank you very much. I think this is a bit of a double act between the two of us. So as background for members, this is a discussion that the chairman, the vice chairman, Aidan as executive director and myself had about the role and the capacity of this committee. And it came out of some training that the chairman and vice chairman attended, where there was reference to guidance issued by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy on the role of audit and governance committees. And part of that was around assessing the capacity of your committee, looking at the terms of reference and saying, have you actually got the right mix of skills and capacity on the committee in order to function most effectively as an audit and governance committee. So that's what prompted this item on your agenda, and specifically, is there a need to carry out any sort of skills audit amongst the membership of the committee, and then look at filling any gaps potentially by co-option. There is an important point about timing here. This item was on your agenda for 24th of March. That meeting didn't happen because at that stage we'd gone into lockdown and we didn't have regulations to enable virtual meetings to happen. Ordinarily by now we would have had the annual meeting of council and we would know for certain what the membership of the committee would be for the next year. The annual meeting is in September, so Chairman, you might think it's slightly premature to do a skills audit now when your membership could change in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think for members, it's when the Vice Chairman and myself went on this training course, it was a very informative course, and one of the points that came up was that in essence a committee is only as good as its knowledge, and there was that point, do you have a trained accountant as one of your committee members? And the sort of, if not, why not? Can you pull it from the various groups within the council, or do you need to co-opt an independent member? So as Jonathan says, you know, because of the timings of this, it's perhaps a little bit presumptuous, but what we really need from members and talking with their group leaders, etc., is, you know, do we have the right people? Do you have the training that you would like? If you want further training, what training would you like that on? And then you could let myself know, Aidan know, etc., so that we can have a committee that is as fully functioning and knowledgeable as we need it to be. Does any member have any questions on that or points that they would like to raise? Yes, Councillor Bill Pipe.
Thank you, Chairman. Going back to Purbeck District Council days, we quite regularly had a training day, which was every year, which was normally held at Dorchester Cricket Ground, incidentally, where the external auditor would come in and give us a whole day training on how to understand things, how to come to various opinions and the like, and I thought it was very, very good. Perhaps our current external auditors, in conjunction with Southwest Auditing, could perhaps put on something similar.
Question for you, Aidan. Do you think that you could get something like that organised, or do you think that there are people within the LGA that could help us do that?
Yeah, both. I think a training day is always useful to improve the collective governance of the council. So I've got contacts in the LGA that could help, and indeed SIPFA as well, and I'm sure the external auditors would be interested. So I can certainly arrange something if it's of interest for members.
Yeah, I think if you could get something like that organised, that would be really helpful. I know that SWAP do regular training, usually in October. Obviously times may vary this year because of the pandemic, but if you could touch base not only with the LGA but with Deloitte and Rupert at SWAP, Aidan, and then see what we can pull together. Councillor Biggs.
Yes, just to mention, obviously, as you said, we both went on the LGA course. I think the issue of having an independent member is probably not appropriate for us. And I think examples where it would be appropriate, I think we're given were where you've got a one-party political sort of balance. For instance, I think in the case of Manchester, where it's all but one councillor is a Labour member, you need that independence to make sure that that they're not marking your own homework, if you like. We've got a mixed cabinet here, Audit and Governance Committee, and we've got yourself and myself from a different political party, which I think is good. But I think, yes, we do need to get that wide knowledge that the people bring to the table, and I think we're aware that there are members who carry out skills. I think Councillor Christopher, I believe, is an ex-auditor. So I think we probably have got those skills here, but I think it'd be good to try and get the membership and people who aspire to come on here are coming for the right reasons and come with perhaps a background, to get a broad spectrum, not just formal skills, but a wide need to represent obviously the electorate as well, and the type of probably more women on this committee, what I think would be useful as well.
Thank you, Councillor Biggs. So if I could leave it to all members of this committee to go away, have a think about it, see and think about the types of training that you would like to have that you think would be useful. If you're going to remain on this committee, you know, if you've spoken with your relevant group leaders, and if you could email that to myself and copy in Jonathan and Aidan, I think that would be really helpful. Any other questions or comments from members? I'll take the silence as no. So then if we move on to agenda item, I think number 10, 11 and 12 are all over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chairman. And if I could take items 10 and 11 together, because they are in effect this really in the same area of business, if you're happy for me to do that.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So several times this morning, Chairman, there's been mention of various of the predecessor councils, and I think these next items are really in the area of being one council going forwards. So in preparation for local government reorganisation, we did a great deal of work to harmonise policies of the predecessor councils, and there were a number of policies that was absolutely essential and working practices that it was absolutely essential that we had harmonised for day one, 1st of April 2019, and we did that, and we had that launch where we were safe and legal on day one. But we also knew that for other important areas of policy harmonisation, the government had made regulations giving us 2 years to bring together 9 key policy areas. So areas in which predecessor councils had each had their own separate policies covering their geography. And when we came together as one council, it was important that we moved to have single Dorset Council area-wide policies. There were 9 of those areas, and we were required to adopt new harmonised policies within 2 years. We were also required to adopt a local plan, a Dorset Council-wide local plan, within 5 years. We've made really good progress in those nine areas. 6 of them we will either have adopted already, or will have adopted by 1st of April 2021 Dorset Council-wide policies. So there's no issue with those. There are 3 areas in which we're not certain that we will be able to adopt policies in time on a Dorset Council-wide basis. That's directly as a result of COVID-19 and our not being able to go out to communities and consult them at the present time about important policy changes. So we've written to government, and yesterday we had a letter back from the minister, and he confirmed helpfully that we would be able to secure an extension, he believes, for those areas. We have also been given an extension by the government digital service for consolidating web domains, so we've got a 12-month extension for that. So it's a very positive picture overall, but there are these 3 areas where we won't achieve 1st of April 2021, but we are getting an understanding message back from central government and an expectation that we will be given more time.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do members have any questions? I'll take that as a note. Thank you, Jonathan, for your verbal update on 10 and 11. Do you have anything for number 12, the constitutional changes?
Chairman, if I can just update you briefly for constitutional changes, the change we have made is in relation to standing orders to enable meetings like this to go ahead. The council's normal standing orders for meetings were written on the basis of traditional face-to-face meetings where we sat down in a room together. to facilitate the sort of meeting like the one we've had today, we've had to make some changes to standing orders. I have a delegation that enables me to do that, but I wasn't comfortable doing that without consulting with members. So before making those changes, I consulted with group leaders and secured agreement to what are very practical changes to enable meetings to happen. But I'm happy to answer questions about those.
Thank you, Jonathan. With regards to our meetings, do we have any idea from government as to when we can go back to face-to-face meetings legally, or is it just a question of each individual council deciding when it is deemed safe to do so? What is the update on that?
Chairman, I don't have a date for that. We know that the coronavirus regulations that give you the flexibility to meet virtually are in place until May 2021. If it's safe and right to do so, then you could return to face-to-face meetings sooner than that. I think probably as members you will want to give some thought to whether across the board for all council meetings you do wish to return to face-to-face meetings. Some committees it might be most appropriate to go back to what used to be business as normal. Other committees might wish to continue to meet virtually, and I haven't sat in on a planning committee, for instance, but my understanding is that the planning committees have never been as well attended as they are now because of the significant numbers of people who are able to log on and see planning applications being determined. So I don't think there will necessarily be a one-size-fits-all going forwards.
Thank you, Jonathan. I don't know if, as the leader is on or the deputy leader is on, whether they wish to make a comment. Councillor Wharf.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the things we're doing at the Reset and Recovery EAP, which I chair, is we're considering how we can retain some of the very few good things out of the pandemic. And one of those is to ensure that we can continue with virtual meetings. We've met with all of the group leaders, the leader and myself, and I think we're all pretty clear that we want to be able to have face-to-face meetings, and there needs to be some hybrid solution to meetings rather than a one-size-fits-all, as the monitoring officer says. And what I'm going to do at the EAP for Recovery and Reset is we're going to hold a meeting towards the end of August, at which we're going to have some members in the building, some members virtually, and some members in the building observing, and some members virtually observing. And the purpose of this is to actually just have a run through of hybrid meetings and to try and ensure that we don't have people who attend meetings virtually feel in any way disadvantaged. So the answer is yes, we are looking at it. Yes, we've taken soundings and everybody seems to be agreed that whilst we want to continue with virtual meetings, we don't want to go solely to virtual meetings, and there is something missing when you can't look at the whites of people's eyes. And we are going to try some hybrid meetings. And Spencer and I, when we last talked, we were quite keen that the September full council meeting would be hybrid, but obviously those people that have to isolate would be able to attend virtually. So we're still working it out, and we'll get back to you when we've got some findings as to how hybrid meetings work. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Peter. I don't know whether this is a question for yourself or for Jonathan, but what advice on this is Dorset Council giving to town and parish councils?
I would leave Jonathan to answer that. I think I know the answer, but I think Jonathan would be better placed.
Right, Chairman, we haven't given any particular advice to town and parish councils other than to share some of our own best practice notes for running these sorts of meetings. I think the same point applies to us as it does to town and parish councils, though. We might wish to retain the flexibility to hold some virtual meetings. It will depend on legislative change, because unless the law changes, then when we come to May 2021, we will have to revert to face-to-face physical meetings in a room anyway. So it does depend on government giving us flexibility if we are able to carry on doing this beyond that date. And that applies to towns and parishes as well.
So do the current rules allow for or not allow for face-to-face meetings now?
Chairman, that's about the relaxation of lockdown, and lockdown is being relaxed all the time. I need to go away and look at the rules on people gathering in one place, people from more than one household. So I haven't got an answer for you on that now.
I think perhaps when you've got that answer, it would be useful for that answer to be known to members, but also to be passed on to town and parish councils, because I know that there are a number who are asking whether they can or can't hold meetings face to face now, and they are looking to Dorset Council for the guidance.
Chairman, I can certainly do that.
Brilliant, thank you. I believe the leader, Councillor Spencer Flower, wishes to make a comment.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just very briefly, I want to endorse what Peter's already said about how we're looking at meetings going forward. And I think there's some learning. We don't want to lose all the learning we've gained through this crisis. And and Jonathan's absolutely right. I think there's a sunset clause in the legislation that is allowing us to have virtual meetings. I think we could do I can certainly do a bit of lobbying through the LGA, because I think there's some merit in having a mix, and I think it's up to us as the 82 of us to make a judgment ultimately about what balance we want. I think there is a balance to be struck between in-person meetings and other meetings that we can easily take place on a virtual basis. So both Peter and I and others are very open-minded about this, and we'd encourage colleagues across the chamber to get involved in helping us shape how we take this forward. But I will certainly be doing a bit of lobbying, because I think there is some benefit from having some meetings that continue virtually. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Leader. Jonathan, did you want to add anything else?
Chairman, only to say that I think it's been commented already today that not a lot of good has come out of coronavirus, but what it has done in a number of instances is dragged us forward, perhaps more into the 21st century. Your meetings is one example of that. There are other flexibilities that we'd like to retain in other areas. The registration service, being able to deal with registrations over the telephone or online, rather than people having to physically attend an office always. There are all sorts of flexibilities that I think by lobbying we could get, and they'd be very welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Bill Pipe.
Thank you, Chairman. Virtual meetings, okay, we have to do them now, but what I would not like to see is the removal of the actual meeting. You know, it's already been said you can't see the whites of their eyes, you can't see the body language. I would really not want to see virtual meetings be in the predominance. I would much prefer to pitch up and have a good old debate in the old-fashioned way.
Thank you, Bill. I'm sure the leader and Councillor Wharf will take your comments on board. Any other questions from members? If not, that was just a verbal update. We'll move on to agenda item 13, which is the forward plan. We've obviously from today's meeting got a couple of things for Fiona to add on for September, which is around the swap reports. I did notice that our November meeting is rather short in terms of things to come up. So I was wondering whether committee members would like to go away and think about whether they wish to do a deep dive into a certain area that we could perhaps programme in for November. So if you've got any ideas, do email me them, and if you copied in Aidan and Jonathan about that, that would be really helpful for them to look over it. And of course, with the forming of the two extra scrutiny committees, we need Jonathan to make sure that it is for us to be diving into and not one of the other committees. Aidan, I believe you wish to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I could just quickly comment on the accounts. We heard from the external auditor earlier a little bit about the preparation underway for the accounts. So traditionally, we're required to sign off the accounts by the 31st of July, but given the pandemic, nationally the timetable's been shifted, and the statutory deadline now is the 30th of November. I'm hoping to sign off the draft accounts during the course of next week, so that they're ready to be sort of formally audited, although we've heard that the groundwork's already started. So one of the I don't think the accounts, or in fact the accounts won't be ready for the August meeting, given the delays on the timetable. So I'm wondering if it would be appropriate if we could shift both the review of the accounts and the audit letter from August to the November meeting, and that'll so they'll be ready there. That'll hit the statutory deadline, and it will also, given the lightness of the agenda for November, it'll give us a chance to really get into the detail of the accounts, if that's what the committee wishes to do.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with that, Aidan, but still for members, because whether it's November or another month, or whether it's an extra meeting, if there are areas within the council's work that you feel that we need as a committee to look in further, do let me know. Any questions from any members with regards to the forward plan, please? I'll take the silence as a no, so we move forward on to agenda item 14, which is urgent business. I believe from Fiona there is no urgent business, but I remember that Councillor David Gray wanted to say something in any other business. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Chair. It was a question really for you. So excuse the naivety, and I apologise to the committee members who aren't either Weymouth, Portland or Chickerell, but I'm wondering from an audit and governance point of view whether we ever review decisions made geographically. And the context of this is there's been some really key decisions made by the council during the lockdown that has really affected Weymouth and Portland and probably Chickerell. And I'm wondering, they don't fall under one title subject. So I'll give you a couple of examples. You know, we've got the pedestrianisation or temporary pedestrianisation of the harbour. We've got the homeless issue, which has been well covered in the press. And its effects on Weymouth. We've got the social deprivation issue, which is still overriding in Weymouth. We've got the hospitality industry, which is on its knees. I'm wondering whether some of the decisions that the council has made in the last few months, whether geographically we ever audit or look at the governance of those decisions. And I apologise in advance if this is under the sort of respond recovery EAP or some other committee, but I'm more concerned with how the decisions were made rather than the actual decision. Thank you.
Jonathan, I believe you're the best place to answer whether this is within our jurisdiction or not. Over to you.
Well, Chairman, I think first of all, wherever it's dealt with, it's important that there is an opportunity for members to scrutinise issues, whether it's on a geographical basis or a specific subject. So there's no reason why members couldn't look at something on a geographic basis. I think the right place is probably for this to happen in the resources scrutiny overview and scrutiny committee, not because this is a particular resources issue, but because when we started to look at scrutiny of all things COVID related, there was a decision made that there should be one committee concentrating on that, and that should be the Resources Committee. Forgive me, I don't remember the date when they're meeting in July, but we have got a Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee coming up, and we could have a conversation with the chairman, Councillor Piers Brown, about his agenda for that meeting and whether there is scope to have that particular focus on Weymouth or not.
So Jonathan, would you suggest that Councillor Gray contacts you directly with the list of the issues that he's got for you to then have a conversation with the respective chairman? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I think so. And if we perhaps we have a three-way conversation, myself, Councillor Gray, and the chairman of the committee.
Are you happy to do that, Councillor Gray? And it sounds as though that would need to be done fairly soon. Is that okay with you?
Yes, I'm happy with that answer. I can certainly put some words in an email to Jonathan, you know, on the sort of subjects that I'd like audited. Thank you.
And if I've got it wrong and it's potentially place scrutiny, overview and scrutiny, again, we can facilitate that, because I don't see any reason why you could not have a geographical look at something rather than an individual subject matter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Susan Cooking.
Thanks, Matt. Could I be included in that conversation as well? Because we have a similar issue to what Councillor Gray's noting, but on a slightly smaller scale. But we've had the homeless, hospitality, and we've been really impacted on those decisions by the council as well. So if it's possible, I'd like to be included in that as well for the impact on Portland.
I think what I would suggest to you, Susan, is if you do exactly the same as David Gray, if you put that in an email to Jonathan, then Jonathan can disseminate it to the relevant chairman.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you.
Councillor Richard Biggs.
Yeah, I think what is key for us perhaps is to understand whether local member consultation has occurred in accordance with the Constitution, whether special powers have sort of overridden that. I think that's possibly our focus. The fact that, you know, there's a number of issues in Weymouth and Portland is one matter, but I'm sure members can think of things in their own areas. Perhaps it appears that all in Weymouth and Portland, but I think it's a general area that we need to perhaps look back and whether, you know, that was adequately covered and whether that's something we need to strengthen in the future.
Councillor Lacey Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. We had a very good question asked by David, and it was answered, and it should go to scrutiny. I'm not sure why we're still discussing it. We've had the answer. Can we please move on? This obviously affects everybody.
I think in some respects you're right, Nock. I would suggest that for any councillor, whether on this committee or of the wider 82, if they got specific issues relating to the way that Dorset Council has made decisions in their local area, then they need to forward those on to Jonathan for Jonathan to then forward and discuss with the relevant chairman. Councillor Mike Parks. Oh no, your point has been covered. Thank you.